Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Ben, thanks for joining me on the Rad Dads Show. I'm going to start the way we always do, and that's by asking, who are you?
I'm Ben Andress. I live here in a small town called Tillsonburg, Ontario, Canada. I'm a rad dad, I think. My kids say so anyway. So I got four kids, and a cat kid too. So I'm a cat dad. And I also run a record label and put out CD and vinyl and cassette by bands you probably will like. And if you don't like them, we'll make you like them.
Yeah, so I mean, you answered the first question. You're a rad dad, self-described rad dad. Well, you said your kids describe you as a rad dad. So, how many kids do you have?
I have three kids, and then I got my stepson as well too. So there's four. So
And how old are they?
they range between. I'm like, oh, you're gonna ask me this. So the youngest. So there's two Leos. So actually here's the youngest of my dudes here. You want to say hey, Max?
Hey, Max. I'm Brett. How are you? Oh, good. Thumbs up.
Thumbs
Me
up.
too.
So Max is five,
You know where my Lego is? Oh, there it is.
and then we have Willow. Willow's nine.
Is that Willow? Hey, Willow. I have a 9-year-old daughter too. Her name's Elise.
Crazy,
So,
eh?
so are you in grade? What are you in grade three or four? Three. Nice. Yeah, my daughter's in grade four, but her birthday's in December, so she's kind of the young one in her class.
The youngest.
Yeah, and then there's little Leo's the youngest. So there's two Leos. So my Leo is seven, and then my partner, her son, little Leo, his name's Leo. So when our kids first met, they all started calling him Fake Leo. They like, one's like Leo and one's fake Leo. And I'm like, maybe you guys shouldn't call him fake Leo. You might be hurting his feelings. So then, like, he was like a little dude at the time, like he had no clue. But so it ended up migrating from fake Leo to little Leo and big Leo. And
Yeah.
now it's like they still like, even like when they're not all together and there's no two Leos in the room, they're all still called little Leo, and big Leo, big Leo. So it's those are nicknames I think that are gonna probably stick around forever. So
That's so unique. Two kids in the house with the same name.
yeah,
Yeah, I also like that it's Big Leo and Little Leo, as opposed to like what my kids do is always like they'll meet another person named Brett and they're like, "Oh, you're Brett one and they're Brett two." But still, that implies some hierarchy that you don't want there, right?
yeah.
I accidentally dropped a hat down that drain by accident.
Oh, I can try to get it out for you, bud.
Oh no, like
I know what drain you're talking about. Yeah, Dad got in there. So we have a drain in our basement, and I'm assuming it was probably little Leo started doing it, maybe, because he used to like he was the youngest, and like the other kids wouldn't admit to it. Love you, hon. Um, but I found like there's a drain in the basement, and it was like I started smelling like kind of like that gross smell basement smell, and I'm like, oh man, our drain in the basement's probably clogged. And so I started like digging into it and like using like some pincher tool, and I'm like pulled out like three Hot Wheels, and like there's just like all these things, and it's not like they could just fall in the drain. It was like crammed in there, so it was like yeah. So there's a little drain in the basement, and I guess Max dropped a Lego guy in there, so.
Yeah.
I'll be on another drain mission.
Yeah, oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, you know what's funny? I remember when I was a kid, like dropping something in the toilet in the bathroom. Like it was like a little ornament that was like on a shelf behind it, and it dropped in there, and I was like, I'm not getting that out. And so I just pretended it didn't happen. And for years we had problems with that toilet. And finally my parents looked into it and it was like they found this thing that had fallen in there and I felt so bad. It was like one of those like secrets I held on to for so long, and just didn't want to, admit that I was responsible for that. It's so
Funny.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the guys are pretty good about like anytime something happens, they're just like, hey dad, I did this. And I'm like, oh, cool. Why? It's just like, so like, yeah, or like with they're at that age too where they like to kind of like tattletale on each other. Like we've tried to like been like, don't throw your brother or sister under the bus. Like, if it's something like really important, let mom and dad know. But like, if like even this morning, Max came down and he's like, Willow took my tablet and put it on that thing. Like we have like this huge like bacon scale in our kitchen. And like I've been doing like renovations and like cleaning out the whole house. So I cleaned out we took over my grandmother's house and I've been taking like a bunch of stuff out from the cupboards and there's like this old metal scale that's like a bacon scale that like I will never really use. So it's sitting on the table. I pulled it out last night, and Willow just took Max's tablet and threw it on the scale. And he's like, Willow took my tablet and put it on that thing that weighs things. I'm like, okay. I'm like, was it funny? No, not really. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of funny. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, whatever.
Yeah, my kids are around the same age, right? Like I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and same thing, like in that kind of tattletale phase. And so we're trying to deal with that too. And it's like, well, first of all, I'm going to return to something you said, and that was, that your kids will just kind of tell you when they do stuff. I'm sure that's just because they trust you, which is cool. That's probably a rad dad quality. So, not all kids feel that way. Maybe that was it. I was worried about my parents, and that's why I didn't didn't tell them. I have great parents, by the way, but yeah, the tattletale thing, I have tried to talk to my kids about like if it's safety related, then come tell me. But otherwise, like you guys just work it out, right? You don't need to tell somebody about it. Same thing at school, like you don't need to tattle on kids on the playground or whatever, unless it's, someone's safety's at risk. Then go tell somebody.
Yeah, it's at that point where like they're starting to kind of catch on that like like I think a lot of it too, like, and I think they know that it's like they're just trying to get the other person in trouble kind of thing, and it's like just so they can. I'm not sure. Like I'm trying to think back on me being like I always get those like pretty much once a day. I always be like, did I do that when I was that age? Or I'll try to like relate it to like when I was a child and like and I have one brother he's 5 years older than me, so like I think like there's that like I can't really exactly relate because of our age gap. Like he was a little bit older doing like we didn't do a lot of things together, I don't think, growing up until like as of like recently kind of thing. In the past like decade or so we started like hitting up some concerts and things like that. But like when we were younger, like he was, you know, by the time I got like old enough to hang and do cool things, like he was already in high school. I was still in like public school, grade school. And then like by the time I got into high school, like he just graduated and left for college. And then I ended up going to the same college he went to for like television production and film. And then like by the time I got into the course, he was already graduated and, moved to a different city. So it was kind of like he was still in the same region, but like we just didn't really get to hang out much until like, until we more I think more so what he has two kids. So I think once I became an uncle, I was kind of like, Uncle Ben, I'd hang out a little bit. And then I had my kids. And then, like, that's kind of when we started getting a lot closer than we did when, for the first time ever in our lives, pretty much. That
Same
I recall, anyways.
same with my sister. My sister's 5 years older, and I almost felt like I hate to say this, but almost felt like an only child as a kid. Like just my memories of like being at home, a lot of them are just like me being the only kid, and it was because my sister, yeah, moved away to go to university, when I was like 12. And so, my whole adolescent years, like I was the only kid at home. So same kind of thing, but we're like best friends as adults. So tell me, Ben, tell me a little bit about Blacktop Records. You kind of glossed over it, but tell me a little, that's kind of your thing. So tell me about that.
Um, so I get so it's a record label. It's I guess it started out of spite, kind of. I was like in a bunch of like when I was younger, like, crappy like punk bands that, would bring like 15 people out to shows kind of thing. And like, I was in a band called Blacktop Recess. And this is like, like the end of high school, first year of college. and like I wasn't. I was the singer in the band, and like in their defense, not that good of a singer, and they ended up going a different way with the band, and they'd start. We'd have band practice, and then like I would leave, and they would all pretend to leave, and then they would just like turn their cars
Oh
back and go. They
no.
would go jam with the four of them, and so like I think so like I don't know, that happened for like 3 or 4 months, and like I was just oblivious to it, and then I called the drummer one day, just my buddy Matt, and just be like, yo, you want to hang out kind of thing or something. And his mom's like, oh, he's at band practice. Why aren't you there? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this all makes sense now. And so like, yeah, there was like, so that kind of happened, and then they were called Blacktop Recess, and then I was just like, all right, cool. And then so I kept getting all these emails for like from promoters and like other bands being like, yo, you want to play this show? And I'm like, well, I'm not in Blacktop Recess anymore, but my buddies and there was like this young band at the time that we'd always like um well, young band, they were like a year younger than us. They were like from the neighboring town, and we'd play shows together. They were called the Walk with Anastasia. So anytime I got a show offer for our band, I would give it to a Walk with Anastasia. I'd be like, these guys are dope, like you should book them instead. And then they
Hilarious.
had, yeah, so that's kind of like how it started, was just passing on all the show offers we got to like some cool kids from the area. And then they had like a 4-song EP recorded, and they're like, we don't know what to do with this. I'm like, put it out. And they're like, how do we do that? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll start a record label and we'll just figure it out. And then my first year of college, I hand fed 500 brown paper lunch bags through a computer printer, and every four would jam. And like we ended up doing these like cool cases, very DIY CDR. We booked a CD release show. um it was pretty rad. Like the full blast played it with them, and like there's like like a sleeper set sale I think played. So a bunch of like kind of veterans
Awesome.
from the Ontario scene. The Full Blast is awesome. I think Full Blast has probably played out that way a bunch.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And Brian from the Full Blast is in the Wilhelm Scream. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, that's if people haven't heard of the Full Blast, that's probably one of the connections they might want to check out.
yeah. I forgot that. Well, I didn't forget. It's funny too because they side quest here, and I try not to do these too often. Actually, buddy Snodgrass has been like, we'll talk, and he'll be like, dude, like let's keep on track. Let's stop the side quest, and I'll like be like, well, I don't know. It's kind of, I like the spider web of stuff and rambling off and going this way, but
But
no,
John's a bit of a side quest guy too, so maybe yeah, maybe the two of you together isn't a great great fit when you're
no,
trying to make plans.
yeah, he's trying to like, he's working pretty good on like keeping on track, and then we'll get on a call, like especially with the festival we're working on together, and he's like, let's try to finish this task, and so it's like it's actually it's helping me out a bit, like kind of working with him on this,
Nice.
but Willem Scream played a show like in London, Ontario, like near me. And I was out with I think maybe two of my kids. I think the boys were with me, and we went out for lunch in this like neighboring small town, Ingersoll, and there's this place called Louis. It's like this like pizza place, and like I show up there, and I'm like, "Hey, you guys look really familiar," and I'm like, "Oh, it's a Willem Scream," and then like I ended up bumping into Brian there. It was probably the first time I saw him since like 2005, I think. So that was like, now that was probably about like 7 years ago, maybe not that. I guess maybe 5 years ago. It was like right before the pandemic, anyways. Um, but yeah, I always like kind of forget that he was in that band. I remember seeing like a magazine. It was like uh, bass. There was like a big full page. It was like featured like bass players, and I'm just like, hey, I know that guy. That's pretty rad. So
Oh, he's an incredible bass player.
yeah.
So Ben, tell me like quickly for people who maybe they haven't checked out Blacktop Records, like what are some of the releases you put out that you're really kind of proud of or excited about?
There's a bunch of random stuff over the years that like it's like this weird ABBA to Zappa mixtape of like just I listen to the catalog, and you can kind of like see you know different. Like it's not very like a lot of labels will be very coherent with like the stuff they put out, and it'll be like if you're a metal label, you're a metal label. Like I'm like this like weird mixtape of like whatever. But some releases I'm pretty stoked on over the years. We did a 7-inch for Lisa Loeb, which was like pretty cool, and
Yep.
Steve Martin plays banjo on the B side, which is like kind of crazy. We put out some stuff for Weedus, which is really rad. I like those guys like throughout the years, and um, yeah, so we
I
did.
saw you've done some stuff for David Liebehart.
Yeah, we did this. That was like we did this. Helped them put out a DVD, and like that wasn't like anything like like we didn't really do like we just licensed a DVD off
Okay.
him and did that. But I've booked him a couple times for shows, and he's a very very unique person. And his yeah, it's actually I have here. It's very close by here, but I'll show you this. This is one thing I do keep up here. I wonder if there's a way I can switch this around. So this is a portrait he did of me.
Oh, that's amazing. So,
So
and if people don't know who David Liebehart is, and maybe I don't know his whole career, but I definitely know him from Tim and Eric, Awesome Show, Great Job.
that's pretty much um, yeah, that's a good start of his thing. Like I think he had like this like a Christian talk show or something like that. On like like some cable access. I feel like Tim Heidecker and like Eric, I
Wareheim.
can't think. Yeah, Wareheim. I think they would just like probably when they started the show would just hang out and watch like late night like infomercials and like just like find like weird stuff on like cable access TV and be like, man, this person would be a very unique character to have on our show. And then like yeah, that's just kind of like I think how they found him was on some show because he I think he did it for like a decade at least, and then um, yeah, and then they had him on there, and yeah, he's just very very unique character. I'm like we crossed paths. I was offered to book him at one point, and then just kept in touch with his management and him, and yeah, and then we did that DVD, which was like pretty fun. I think that's probably the second DVD release I've done on the label. So,
Yeah.
um, but
Well,
yeah, there's stuff like that. Like there's like even just like there's some current stuff that I'm really stoked on. There's a band from Toronto called Kixie. We have their record coming out in a couple. Well, this month. It's just came out digitally. We did a couple releases for them. This guy from Arkansas named Ricky Bascom that I'm really stoked on. It's like kind of like Chief Keef and R. Kelly and Queen put in a blender. Like
wow.
it's just insane, out of pocket type stuff. But I'm trying to like expand my horizons a bit while listening to some music. And then two, actually another really rad dad. When I was a kid, I was a really big I Mother Earth fan. There were like I was like, a 90s rock radio guy
Yep.
growing up.
Yep.
I'd like, yeah, I'd have my cassette tape out ready to hit record, before, Marcy Playground would come on, record Sex and Candy, and then like, or whatever. And just like, that was kind of my first, like, like, oh man, I really like 90s alternative rock. And then, I Mother Earth. I remember having a relative show me Dig and Scenery and Fish, and I kind of dug it. And then they got a new singer, and Brian Byrne is just like one of the most incredible vocalists I've ever met or heard in my life. And throughout the years, we ended up becoming friends, and I put out some solo stuff for him. And now he has a project with his wife, Tara, called Two. So we just released some stuff from them. They were recording with we put him in the studio with Bill Bell. Bill, he's in Tom Cochran's band,
Okay.
and like he's like produced a bunch of really rad stuff over the years. Actually, he played with Jason Mraz for like years. I think he still does, but he's like one of those like studio gods where like you just record stuff with him and it just turns out like whoa. But yeah, Brian's he's played like some shows here in Tillsonburg at the venue I book at, and um, they recorded some stuff down here and demoed some stuff, and he parked his camper in our driveway for like a week, and he had his two kids there, Cash and Axel, and my kids were down, and they ended up just like hitting it off, and then, like
Awesome.
they left. Yeah, and so like every like few weeks I'll get one of the kids being like, when's Cash and Axel coming back? And like, so yeah, they're just like, it was kind of cool to like, you know, grow up being like a kid and like loving I Mother Earth, and then like as an adult you get, you know, I'm like, I never thought I'd ever have kids, let alone have my kids hang out with one of the, you know, one of my favorite singers growing up as a kid. So it's kind of like this like cool little round circle thing.
Well,
But yeah,
it, I think that's something that happens with kids, right? Is it kind of like it's a universal yeah, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it kind of brings people together. It's like something that parents share, right? And so something that even if you come from totally different kind of backgrounds and stuff, it's just like you and I, we've never met each other, but we can sit here and talk about, well, music too. We've got lots in common there, but our kids. So I'm curious because you said you weren't sure you were going to have kids. Like, so I guess how did that sort of come about? Were you kind of like, like a lot of maybe people in their 20s where they're like, I'm never going to have kids. I don't need to have kids. That's certainly where I was.
yeah, like I've never like really thought about it too much, or like, you know, it was like proactively being like, oh, you know, with any partner I had was ever like, oh, we should have kids. Like it just wasn't a conversation. And then probably like a lot of people, like my situation was like, you know, a little more not unique, but like I found out about my daughter like 7 months after she was born.
Oh,
Her
wow.
mother. Yeah, so like that was like I wish I knew, obviously, but she you know, I was on tour, I was playing in a band, and like I was sitting at a bus terminal in Toronto waiting for a connection bus somewhere, and I got like a call from Willow's mom, and it was like, hey, you sitting down right now? And I'm like, yeah, kind of, just chilling. Just like, well, you know how I had like a kid recently? I'm like, yeah. Well, that's actually your kid. And it's just like, oh, all right, cool. And like, you know, I just
Wow.
had that like, few thoughts of being like, well, I'm probably not ever going to do this again and do this again. And those were all my kind of first thoughts. And then like, you know, like, and then like, you know, my second thought's like, well, I better just not go where I'm going and go meet this child. And then so yeah, like right away, like just kind of dived right in with like, you know, no prep or like anything like that. And you know, I had a few friends at that time, and like my brother, you know, I was the uncle already, so I'm like, you know, I was pretty familiar with like how to be a rad uncle. So I'm like, yeah, I guess I can be a rad dad, and I'll figure this out. And then, um,
Well, that's
so
crazy because, like, I feel like, one of the things that we obviously it comes up on the show a lot is like, getting prepared for being a dad for the first time, right? And you kind of, it's one nice thing about it, generally speaking, is you kind of have, 9 months to wrap your head around it and figure it out. But you didn't have that.
no, no, it was like it was dive right in, and like it was like, and I know other people in that situation, like, and you know, it's like funny now because like, you know, like even people like it's actually funny, like, because it's I've had relationships strained on my end from like, you know, I've like I know a few people where, you know, they've been in similar situations, like they found out like, you know, maybe just as the baby was born or a little bit before, and not want anything to do with being a dad at all, and kind of like, you know, like I know people who haven't even met their children before, and like it's kind of like people I've been friends with for like my whole life, and it's kind of like now that I have like kids and like how much joy they brought me, I'm like, I really don't want to be your friend anymore. Like if you like, that's kind of like lame.
Deal
So like
breaker.
yeah, it is for me. So I'm just like, I've kind of like yeah, there's like a lot of people like that that's like pushed me away from them, and like I just couldn't understand it. Like the second I met my daughter, I was just like, yep, you're probably the coolest person I've ever met in my life. So um and then I had my boys, and then it was just like, all right, cool. I'm like, now there's like other people equally as cool as you. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what was that transition like for you? Like, were you just kind of like ready to dive in? I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of emotion kind of, tied into all
Yeah.
that, but did you feel like that transition to like, okay, I got to do this. It sounds like you were just like, yep, this is what I have to do. Was that
Yeah,
transition kind of easy for you, or?
it was like I've always been like, especially like I think honestly, like being in a band and having a label and stuff like that, you always kind of like have curveballs thrown your way where you plan and plan and plan. And a show gets canceled, or like you miss a bus, or like or a van breaks down, or all these things. So I've always kind of been problem solving for other things. And I've always made this joke too, where people have been like, "What's running a record label like?" And I'm like, "Well, you're kind of like a dad and a babysitter to like five people at once, like, or however many people are in a band. Like, a lot of times, like especially like when you're younger and stuff, like because I'd be that record label guy that would like, it's not your traditional like I'm wearing a suit and being like, "Oh, we're doing this, and we better have this many units sold," or having I picture the guy with the ponytail and airheads,
Yeah.
or or something like that. But it's like no, like I was the guy where I'm like, "Oh well, I'm gonna sleep on the floor with you," kind of thing. And like I'll sit in these like gross vans for really long times and go on tour and stuff with you. So like I've always done multiple roles, like tour managed and ran a label, so it was kind of very you know um, so I think a lot of that, like just kind of problem solving with bands over the years and stuff. I think using a lot of those skills helped with being a dad. Um, you
It's
know,
like a metaphor for parenting, right? Like um fulfilling lots of different roles. But I like what you talk about, like with the bands, you're talking about like you're a partner with them, right? And that's kind of
yeah,
what it's like to be a dad too. Like you kind of can't, well, I don't know, that's my view, but you can't just always be above them, like pointing down and saying this is what needs to happen. You kind of need to be in it with them.
yeah. No, we always like worked through like the kids, especially now they're at that age where they're becoming more aware of their emotions and like kind of things like that. And we were kind of like if something comes up, we kind of work through it together. And it's not like, or even if they get in trouble, it's not like I remember being a kid and like once again, my mom was like pretty rad and stuff, and like I had were times where you know I'm like, yeah, I think of some of the things like I probably had that similar thing where, if I had like I drop like an ornament in the toilet, I wouldn't tell anyone. That's how my upbringing was. Like, but it was probably 10 times worse. But so I'm like, so I just recall some things from when I was a kid, and I'm like, I definitely would want to work through problems with my children a little bit differently. Instead of just being like, you know, the dad that's not rad. So, um, but yeah, um, yeah, it was just so when that happened, it was just kind of jump in and dive in kind of thing. And like, I didn't drive at that point in time. So I'm like, right away, I'm like, oh, I better get my driver's license. And like, it kind of like kickstarted like a bunch of stuff. Like I was 29, 30, I think. I'm trying to remember how old I was at that point. Maybe 31. Like I was just turned 30 when I found out about Willow. I can't remember exactly, but um and then I had, and if I'm trying to remember the timeline exactly, I think I was just starting to see someone at that point, and like then have to like explain to them, well, like, guess what? I have a kid that I didn't know about, and I didn't know how that would affect that. And then I ended up having two kids with that person, and then now I have another partner with a kid, and all three of those kids. So like it's pretty crazy. So um,
Yeah. And well, and you talked a little bit about you talked about how like you had to do a bunch of stuff after you found out you were a dad, right? So get your driver's license is one thing. What else sort of changed for you?
I stopped drinking. Not that I drank like a lot to begin with, but like I always had this irrational fear, and it's not an irrational fear, I guess, but it was this guy I toured with at one point. We did this little jaunt around the lake. Um, his name was Matt Dell, and Matt never drank, but he would always let me drink it like crazy when we played shows, and he would drive, and then like I would just get fucking just drunk as shit. And like I was just like, why don't you drink? And he's like, well, I don't know. Like if I was ever somewhere and like at a party or whatever, and like someone got hurt, I wouldn't be able to bring him to the hospital or do anything. I would be drunk and I couldn't drive. And I'm like, yeah, that's like a pretty like, you know, cool outlook. Like
You,
that's like, like he was just
super
like this.
responsible.
Yeah, he was such a responsible, like cool kid. Like he was so nice and stuff. So I was just kind of like, um, yeah. So like I kind of like that always stuck in my head. So like I always like had like this irrational, not irrational fear, but like this fear, like what if, someone their mom calls me and they're like, I need you to pick Willow up or Max or Leo or anything. I need you to be there. And then I'm like, well, I'm 4 cans of beer in. I'm sorry, I can't drive. Like I think that would live with me like forever in a very negative way. So I just kind of made sure that no matter what, I, just was able to drive places. So I think maybe once or twice I've like kind of got like drunk, really drunk since then, but I've always, made sure there was people around or like that could drive or my kids or, I was very quite
Yeah.
aware, like, they could be, somewhere where I'm like very well planned out that I'm like, okay, well, I can drink and like it probably won't affect anyone. So, um, I think one of those was with John Snodgrass. Actually, that was probably what I don't ever get drunk at shows and stuff, and I think that's where like Buddies Fest idea came up was like a bunch of beers in. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to talk about Buddies Fest. We're going to get there in a little bit, but I also want to come back um, to the Rad Dad comment. We always that's one thing we kind of try and explore on this show is like, what is a Rad Dad? And the definition can be different for everybody, but I'm curious, like, what's your definition? You said off the top, I'm a Rad Dad. So what does that mean for you? I mean, some of the things you've talked about probably fit into that.
I think just being a rad dad would just kind of be in there and listening to your kids and like helping guide them in a way to grow up to be members of the community that are well respected. No, but you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
listening and like, being a part of what they're doing. Just not, I know like some parents will just like throw tablets in their kids' faces all day. And like, I kind of like to try to get them involved in like, creative stuff and like, talk about things and like just kind of, you know, actually be present and listen and stuff like that. And then also like, I like to plan like a bunch of like really cool like, day trips and like, just things that are like that they'll kind of remember when they're older, like, just like, going to Niagara Falls and, fun, or the beach or like, just things that are like fun that, they'll be like, yeah, I remember these beach days during the summer when I was a kid. Like that was a lot of fun. And like just kind of just do things, I guess, that are fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Spending time with
like,
them, right? Like just like
yeah,
real meaningful time, not just where you're sitting on the couch beside each other. Even though that could be good too. I'm not judging that, but yeah.
yeah. I think breaking it up and doing like
Yeah.
a bunch of different things, and oh, um, you can tell I'm a dad. I'm tired. No, they
Yeah,
yeah,
if we
just
don't get
like
a yawn in the interview, then we know you're just faking it.
yeah, or a yawn or a kid coming up being like, "Yo, I lost my Lego at a drain dad. Can you pull it out for me?" So I'm like, yeah, I knew that was coming.
Yeah, we're
Um,
used to the interview bombs by kids. We love it.
yeah, there's like I don't know. We even we have even just like one thing I like so like is so and like I'll make sure she never listens to this interview, but like my one son, he's like was kind of curious about Fortnite, and I guess like it's 13 plus for Fortnite, and I'm like I don't care, man. Like you play Roblox, there's some like pretty bad stuff on there, and your mom doesn't care. So like I was just like, do you think mom will let you play Fortnite? And he's like, no, and I'm like, Dad will let you play it, bud. I was just like, so it's just like he's has this thing where he's like, don't tell mom that I play like Fortnite. And like the one time I slipped up on they're at their mom's house like during the week, and uh, um, through the school year. And then I made this like slip up where, I was like, yeah, I can buy you some V-Bucks. He's like, you mean Robux, Dad? And I was just like, oh yeah, Robux, that's right. So we have this thing going on where it's like we don't tell mom about Fortnite, but I'm pretty sure she knows because even like Max like kind of blew the cover on him, like, Leo was playing Fortnite, and he's like, no, it was like this Fortnite knockoff game on Roblox. It wasn't real Fortnite. And then like, so I think she knows, and not even that. I just don't even think she would really care. Like,
Yeah. So
So
it's
like,
this
but
it's
it's
this little secret that you guys have, this little special thing
yeah,
between the two of you.
yeah, it's pretty fun. Now everyone's gonna know. So hey,
Yep.
Leo, do you play Fortnite? No.
Good job. Good
Yeah,
job.
so no, I made all that up. That's not real, mom.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, there's like, so it's just like little things like that where like, I think it's fun to have these like little like, like inside jokes or little like not real secrets, but what I mean, like little fun things like that with your kid where it's kind of like, they're just like when they're a little bit older, they'll like kind of maybe like, they're stoked on it now, but I think like looking back on it in time, it'll be like, you know what? That was pretty rad of dad to let me play Fortnite. Not like I'm trying to like one up, his mom or anything like that, but I was just like, not like a bad game. Like, I don't know. It's like playing GoldenEye, but like, you get to be like Peter Griffin or something. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not like a video game guy, so I recently like started like trying to like I don't know. I was playing this like Friday the 13th game during the pandemic
Okay.
on Nintendo Switch, and then like they decommissioned the game, and like I ended up meeting like a little crew of people online, and I'm like for the first time like became this like not a video game guy, but like kind of like, oh man, I have like internet friends. And I'm like, I've always had internet friends, I guess. Like there's so many people I've booked shows with or worked in the industry. Like there's so many booking agents I've never ever met before, and they're internet friends to me, I guess. Like we talk on email, on the phone once in a while, and more than likely I'll never meet them or bro down or anything like that. So um yeah, so it was kind of cool to have this little group of like internet friends, and then like they decommissioned this Friday the 13th game, and they all started playing Fortnite, and they're like, "Ben, play Fortnite." I'm like, I don't know, man, that game seems kind of dumb. And then like, I finally got convinced to do it, and I'm like, you know what, this game's actually pretty cool. And then my son caught me playing. He's like, "You play Fortnite, Dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, you want to play?" He's like, well, Mom won't let me. I'm like, "Well, Dad will." So I was just like, so that's kind of how that all started. But I was
Well,
just
that's
like,
that's cool, and that's cool that you have that kind of bond together. It's the same thing with my kids. I used to be kind of a gamer guy for a little while, and then that kind of like fell off when my kids were little. It was just hard to fit it in. But now they're getting into Nintendo, and so we do that together. So, but it's funny you mentioned the internet friends thing. And to me, that's a great transition into Buddies Fest. We got to talk about Buddies Fest, but I'll start by connecting it to that conversation about internet friends. I was showing you my all tattoo earlier. I'm a huge all
yeah, it's
guy,
so dope.
and I used to be on the all message board like way back, kind of late 90s, early 2000s. There was a message board, met lots of people on there, and that community has really sort of like stuck together over the years. And so I have, my wife kind of like jokingly, makes fun of me a little bit for it, but like I have internet friends specifically around that band, and I'm excited about Buddies Fest. One of the reasons is because some of those people I'm going to meet in real life for the first time
That's
at
awesome.
Buddies Fest, which is cool. And so there's a whole group of us that are sort of planning to meet up and get together and stuff. Um, and so I think music does that, right? Like it brings people together, like you said, like your record label. I mean, you just make so many different connections, and so that's to me what's so cool about Buddies Fest. It's like all these people who kind of are. I said the same thing to John and Bill and Miles, like orbiting around the same bands or kind of in this same universe together, all getting together for this show. So tell me a little bit about how Buddies Fest came together.
Um, I'd say I'm gonna like definitely say like most of this is like it's all Snodgrass. As much as he doesn't want to like take credit for it, he's like, no, it's Ben and Patrick, the owner of the mill, and Patty's Underground. He's like, no, this is a Patrick and Ben thing. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, but like we have all like three of us have worked like pretty hard on this, and like but like he was like we booked him maybe about a year ago. I don't remember the exact date. And uh he yeah, he kind of brought up that, he mentioned that like he plays with Bill usually. He had the guys from Rad Owl, I think,
Yep.
or a couple of the guys in Rad Owl were playing with him, which is a cool, like once again going on this little quick side quest, which was awesome. It turns out their drummer um ended up being in this band called Gratitude, which I was a big fan of. And the singer of Gratitude is this guy Jonah Matrenga, and Jonah, I put out a bunch of stuff for on my label. He was in like One Line Drawn and Far and a bunch of really cool bands in like the late '90s, early 2000s, and so that's kind of like just that spider web of like, oh,
Yep.
that's my buddy, and so like and actually One Line Drawn's playing Buddies Fest, which is cool, and then Rad Owl's playing. So like hopefully we get this like 50% of Gratitude doing a surprise set. I don't know. I'll bug someone about it. But no, it's kind of cool. So like, he just mentioned like, some of the people it came up and like, he plays with Bill. And then like next thing like, he's there for, I think he was supposed to meet up with Chris Cresswell from the Flatliners and they were going to go to a baseball game and he totally bailed on the baseball game so he could just hang out at the mill for an extra day and hang out by the river there and like, eat the food and just kind of chill out in Tillsonburg. And then next thing I'm getting a message, a few months later being like, we got to do that Buddies Fest thing. And then like, it was like a one night festival kind of thing. And then next thing it's like, this person's kind of interested. He's talked to about this person. And then next thing it was like, well, it's like a 3 day thing. Like, this is crazy. But yeah, a lot of it was like, he over the years, like, it just seems like Snodgrass knows everyone. And,
Yep.
I'm getting looped in with like emails from like, some other like people that were like, we asked that didn't play this year. Like, like I'm a really big fan of the Hold Steady. And like
Yep.
now I'm on an email thread with like Craig Finn and like, he's aware of Buddies Fest and he was really interested in playing and couldn't. And like, even stuff like I can't remember, I mentioned something about my kids really love, you're probably familiar with Perry Grip and like
Yep. Oh yeah.
Rain and Tacos.
Yep.
So that's my kids just love like,
Nerf herder.
yeah, yeah. And so John knows Perry Grip and like, we were like trying to like, he's like texting Perry Grip about playing. And so pretty much it was just kind of put the bat signal out to everyone and anyone that was like a buddy and like, and then, yeah. And so we just kind of like, it just kind of came together. And I think a lot of it too was like, he got Chad agreed to play, like
Yep.
Chad Price, and then like he was like probably one of the first people locked in, and then like Scott Reynolds got locked in, and then he was locked in playing, and Bill was very interested in playing. So then we had most of all was gonna be there already. So when we put in the offer to their but and I think this is like where John's like really smart and like I think his whole idea was like, well, they're kind of committed to be here. So if we put in an offer, like, their booking agent's more than likely going to present it to them and they're going to accept because most of the bands can already be there. So I think that was kind of his thinking. And then like, even like having Dillinger Four play, like we
Yep.
ended up, um, I'm trying Patrick Costello
Yep.
from the
Patty.
band.
Yep.
He's his wife is Christy Costello, who's playing Buddies Fest. She was in the band the Bon Bondies, and like she runs a venue somewhere, I think in the Midwest. But she just an incredible artist in music, and he's like, we got to get her to play. And then it was kind of one of these things where it's like, well, if we put in this offer for Dillinger Four, if his wife's playing, more than likely they're going to want to play and be like, yeah, I'll hang out with my wife and get paid to play a show somewhere too at the same time. I don't know if that was like the thought process, but to me, I'm like, it's pretty genius to like book people and then, you book people's buddies and they're like, oh, my buddy's going to be there hanging out or, my wife's going to be there, or whatever. So it
Yep.
was just kind of all spiderweb together. And then I've been like setting up shows for like about 20 years now. And like I've been running some pretty rad shows out of this venue here and the owner Patrick's like pretty tight with a couple booking agents too and like he he's friends with like Cresswell and like so Snodgrass so we were able to like lock up the Flatliners pretty easy and pretty quick and like um yeah like I'm just like look at that festival flyer and like top to bottom it's just like
It's
all
nuts.
buddies. Yeah, I'm just like everyone on there is like great. Um like C's is playing. C's is a bunch of the dudes from Monine. And like I was always a big Monine fan growing up and like cross paths with those guys over the years and like kind of became pals with Hippie and like so we got them to play. So a lot of people were buddies that we either just texted or were really good buddies with the booking agent and they kind of suggested a few bands that kind of run with that circle. And I actually kind of started doing that like a family tree. I'll send it to you. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
I
do
got
that.
I got pretty much like everyone connected in some sort of way, either through like sharing band members or like, sharing the same record label. Like, I know like even like I wanted to have One Line Drawn play, and then it turned out that Jonah was on Extra Mile Records. He did like a split with like Frank Turner, and like he's done a bunch of stuff. And I guess Drag the River was on Extra Mile as well too. So like there was like kind of like all these connections where it was like he's like Snodgrass had a lot of trust in like some of the people I booked, and it was like, yeah, if they're buddies, like they're buddies. If you say they're buddies, and they're good buddies, then like that was kind of his outlook. Was like, you know, there was a couple people that were mentioned, and it was just like, oh, they're buddies, but they're not like buddy buddies, like so like there's just like so we kind of made sure that like that it was like some pretty everyone was kind of buddies in some sort of way. Like I don't think anyone's showing up as a lone wolf. Like one person's gonna at least have a buddy there hanging out, or like so it's like, yeah, top to bottom. I'm like, I've done music festivals before where there's been like a couple cool headliners, and then like a lot of like local bands are like all the way down. And I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes like filler bands where I'm like,
Yeah.
you're a band and you're not my favorite band by any means. But like, so this is the first festival I've done. That's first of all like a 3-day festival. It's a very ambitious project, and like
Yep.
John, I owe it a lot to John and Patrick at the mill for like, just Patrick's like just allowing this on his property and to happen, and just trusting that me and Snodgrass are gonna bring the ruckus that weekend. So um
So it's funny. When I talked to John, I said, John, like one of your big contributions, I feel like for this festival is you have given a new or provided a new tagline for Tillsonburg, Ontario. It's not the middle of nowhere. He keeps saying that online, right? Because it's funny, and I hope I'm not offending you by saying this, but like a lot of, I'm sure you've seen a lot of like the comments are like where is this
oh
happening,
yeah.
right? And I'm from a small town too. I'm from Medicine Hat, Alberta, so I know what that's like. But it's so cool that it's happening in a place like Tillsonburg. And I love how John's like he's just like, no, it's the best. When I was talking to him, he's like, it's just the best. You look out the back of this place, there's a river, there's trees. Tell me what it's going to be like. Like, tell me a little bit about Tillsonburg and about the mill, and what this experience is going to kind of look and feel like.
um so Tilsonburg's, yeah, it's funny, like because I'll like book like some tours for bands. Like we just like we had like Protest the Hero do like a
Yeah, I saw
3 day,
that.
and like so you'll look at like their tour poster, and it's like Toronto, Chicago, Tillsonburg. And so, or you'll see stuff like that. And it's like, or we've had bands come down and like be like, yeah, we just got off the highway and like we just drove through a bunch of cow fields for like, 20 minutes to get here. Like, it's like, what? And yeah, I think like so like I think the appeal to a lot of bands playing is that a lot of people grew up in small towns. Like we had
Yep.
at the venue last night, this like really rad band called Great Lakes Swimmers.
Oh
I think they're like
yeah.
their Paper Bag Records band, really cool band, really, really, really nice people too. And but they're at the venue last night, and like they grew up in Waynfleet, Ontario, like outside of Niagara Falls, and like really small town. So like a lot of I think band members, even though they might reside in Toronto or like Edmonton or like a bigger city now, they all have at least one or two members, if not all of them, that grew up in a small town somewhere and like kind of know those small town vibes, and like had to bus in or drive into, a city a half hour, 20 minutes or whatever to, shop or go to shows or any sort of entertainment. So I think a lot of bands can relate to it that way. So I think there's an appeal to the artist, having this like small town vibe, like this is where I grew up. And then yeah, other than that, like having people come out that, there is like a little bit of a scene in Tillsonburg, and like, but I'd say, more than 50% of the people, if not more, that come out to shows we book come from like all these small little neighboring towns, or they drive in like, from the city somewhere because, they might not be able to see the band, or that band
Yeah.
might not be hitting up their market this time around. So we do get a lot of people coming in from out of town. Um, but yeah, Tillsonburg's like a really like it's like pretty it's getting close to like a city now. Like the populations, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm not good with estimating or remembering the entry signs when you come into town of what the population is. I don't think they've updated in a decade either.
Yeah.
I think they lie about the population so they can get like more government grants. Like we're still a town of Tillsonburg, even though it's like a city. But no, so yeah, it's a cool little vibe. There's a lot of really cool spots to eat that are like a lot of mom and pop shops. Just outside of town, there's like this guy Dave has like a little. He has like this like it's like this huge garage built off of his property, but he's opened up like a record shop there, and
Oh,
like
cool.
he gets all the new record store day releases and all that stuff. So like there's like stuff like that around here. But like just in general, the mill is like it's like this nice warm place, like by a river. You go out and the scenery is just beautiful, and like you kind of just chill. And then like the owner, once again, I owe a lot to like the owner Patrick of the mill. His hospitality is super on par. Like anyone that shows up to his place, like he always makes sure that they feel like family. Um, and so I think that's kind of the appeal to like a lot of guests and attendees to events. So if people haven't been to a show in Tillsonburg yet, if they come to the mill or Patty's Underground, they'll definitely like once they're there, they'll realize, oh, the
They'll
staff,
get
like
it.
everyone's they just go way out of their way to make sure that everyone's having a good time, all the way from the attendees to the band's playing. So there's just that kind of hospitality vibe that's kind of like no other. Um, but yeah, for Buddies Fest, it's the first time we've done anything outdoors at the mill. Like there's just this little, 80 cap venue nestled underneath of this super, super busy restaurant. It's usually like an older crowd. The church crowd goes there on Sunday, to eat fish or whatever. And like, there's a lot of like, I think the outside yard once in a while they'll do like wedding parties and we'll do
Yep.
photos out there. But other than that, like most people just stare out the restaurant window and look at the waterfowl, hanging out on the river. So this is the first time where we've got like a big outdoor stage and like, fenced it off, porta potties. Like we've never done anything outdoors at the mill ever. So it's kind of showing up there will be pretty rad. Like it's
Awesome.
pretty easy going punk rock fest. So people will get a wristband, hang out, watch some main stage bands, and then if they want to just wait around for the next band and drink beer in the beer tent outside, they can, or they can wander inside and then come down underneath to Patty's Underground and get a drink or a bite to eat there and watch more bands. So it's a pretty chill layout.
So it's kind of laid out between the two, like the outdoor main stage, and then there's kind of the smaller shows happening inside as well that you can
Yeah,
kind of go back and forth between.
yeah. So it's like nothing overlaps, so
Cool.
it just kind of goes back and forth, so you can catch everything. Um, like the cap downstairs is a little bit smaller, so like we've tried to not in my mind every band that's playing is a headliner in my eyes, to be honest. Like I'm not
Yep.
just saying to like say it. I'm like there's bands that are playing where I'm like you guys are going to be the fucking the biggest thing ever. And or you are, and so there's there's a lot of bands that are playing downstairs that might not be that would draw, I guess, like a lot of people out. And so we've tried to like put bands that might be I don't want to say smaller, I don't want to, what I mean, but like
I
we've
know what
tried
you
to
mean.
do
Yeah.
it so there's like those bands are downstairs and that, and so we don't get like a lot of people might look at the festival and be like, oh yeah, like I might just sit outside hang out with my buddies and wait to get a really good spot for all or the Flatliners or whatever and kind of just wait outside, where some people are going to be like, oh shit, yeah, I want to go inside and see this guy play or whoever. So we tried to like schedule it that way so we're not going to get an overflow of people. But in my head, I still think with as many people that are there, there's a chance of like like hitting capacity downstairs. So that's like I guess the only logistic thing in my mind that's like mildly, I guess, stressing me out about the festival. But then I bring this stuff up and everyone's like, no, it'll be chill, buddy, like don't worry about it, it'll all work out, it'll be good. So I'm trying to get that mentality. Like it is like a lot of work to like organize everything and like get everyone, you know, everyone hotel rooms that are in their contracts and like kind of play Tetris with everyone and try to figure out who's staying where and doing all the, John's helping a lot with the back line and figuring out the gear and
Yeah.
stuff and looping everyone in with like the sound techs and uh Patrick, the owner, has been like great with like the site plan, porta potties, fencing, stage rental, and like so everyone's kind of doing their part, and it's like, but it's still like a lot of moving gears, and so I'm a little overwhelmed with it. Not gonna lie, I think a lot of it's just because I'm trying to balance being a dad at the same time and doing all that stuff, and like also still, you know, like spreading my love out between all of this. So I feel like it's a big thing, but having people like John and Patrick to help out is makes it feel a lot better. So
Yeah, you need that community. And I mean, speaking of, balancing your dad responsibilities, I know you got to get to a birthday party in the next little bit here. So, I'm going to try and wind this up a little bit, but yeah, thanks for kind of walking us through like what Buddies Fest is going to be like. I mean, I told you I'm so stoked. I mean, just looking at the lineup, and I'm gonna miss people here, but Dillinger Four, Drag the River are playing, who haven't played together in a number of years. Chris Cresswell and the Flatliners, Greg Norton, our buddies Julius Sumner Miller from Calgary, love Darren and those guys. All is playing twice with Chad and Scott. Chad's new band is playing. John's playing with Bill and Miles Stevenson. Like, this is nuts when you when you read this off. So I'm so stoked. I hope if anybody's listening to this or watching this that was thinking about it and hasn't picked up a ticket, I hope they go do it. Tillsonburg's easy to get to from if you're coming from the States, Detroit or Buffalo. If you're in Canada, there's lots of places you can fly into. Toronto, we're flying into Hamilton and coming down from there. You can fly into London. London's close. There's lots of different options. So I hope people will check it out. Is there anything I've missed? Like, if people are looking for more information, where do they go, Ben?
uh buddiesfest.com will have
Okay.
like there's like a little info section too. I'm compiling that list. Like a lot of people are kind of like, where do I sleep? And it's like there's a lot of like in the area, like a lot of like campgrounds and stuff that are like super cheap for the weekend, like provincial parks, pitch a tent for the weekend. Um, Other than that, like, there's like, Facebook and the internet. I kind of want to get a group going. I guess there's the buddies group and stuff like that that Snodgrass has.
Yeah,
And then like the Facebook discussion page, I think is open on the event page, but we're trying to start maybe figuring out like rideshare stuff and like, I've had there's a gentleman from Japan messaged me and actually is flying in and was trying to figure out like how to get from Toronto to Tillsonburg and if there's like still hotels available. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I'm like, it's
that's
super cool that
incredible.
like, yeah, like, and there's like, people for a lot of tickets sold from the States. Like a lot of people are flying in and stuff. And like, I guess the Howard Johnson, I heard, I don't know for a fact, but I think one hotel in town's already booked up. So, but a lot of people I see mentioned get Airbnbs in the area. There's a lot of people that, if you use the Airbnb app, there's a lot of stuff you can rent on there still. Um, and yeah, other than that, like I'm trying to get a list of cool buddies that will like let people pitch tents in their backyard. I'll let a couple people probably pitch tents in my backyard. And yeah, there's just the neighboring towns like these little small towns like Ingersoll, Delhi, Simcoe that are all within like this 20-minute drive and stuff like that, and that all have um um little motels and hotels kind of off the highway and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of places to stay. There isn't like, a lot of like public transportation with like if you do go into a big city like, um, like London or Hamilton, there isn't like a lot of like, there isn't like a Greyhound bus or anything that just comes to Tillsonburg. We're trying to set up like some bus stuff. There's a company in London messaged us and we're trying to work out, some stuff like that. But anything buddiesfest.com will be like the information site's going to be added. The schedules are going to be up in a few days as well too. By the time this airs, those schedules will probably be up,
Sweet.
is my guess. So people can kind of start planning a little bit better, but that site will be very helpful to people. And then the Facebook page, if anyone has like any sort of questions or issues or need help or suggestions, just message us and either John or I will reply on Facebook or Instagram and make sure that everyone gets to come and hang out. It's going to be great. So
Oh man, well I'm so stoked. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there with some of my buddies and looking forward to seeing lots of buddies there. Any this is a rad dad show, so I always like to end with, do you have any advice out there for dads who might be listening? I know we kind of deviated away from that topic for a little while, but yeah, just curious if you have, just some final words for any dads out there listening, or maybe new dads.
um for new dads, like yeah, like I guess like especially like when it's like when they're like really little and stuff. Like actually I remember there's an artist friend that I was like talking to that would always be like he'd be like just like scared that they're so little, like especially little newborn babies, like and just like kind of like what if
Am
I
I gonna
drop my
break
little
it?
guy? Yeah. So like I don't know, like just like that they grew up so quick and like just like cherish those little moments when they're like tiny and like adorable, because there's gonna be days where they're like not super adorable and they're kind of like mean to you. They're no, not all the time, but like I've had like every dad has those moments where you're like, man. But then you just start to think like the reason they're like that is because of you, more than likely. If they're your DNA, so a lot of times those kids take after their mas and their dads. So but yeah, I just find if there's if there's any dads out there, new dads, and you feel like you're having like a hard day or a tough time with one of your kids, just take a breath and like work it through with them, talk to them, and like if it gets to the point, especially if they're at that age where they start like getting a little sassy and stuff, just take a step back, just let them do their own thing for a bit, give them a piece of paper and tell them to draw their feelings out or something, and come back to it. But I think just being really involved and like doing things with your kids and stuff like that, you really don't have time to have those issues. If you're always hanging out on your hands and knees on the floor playing Lego and building things and doing like really cool things that you don't really have. It flies by like really quick. Like my daughter's already 9, like she's like a giant. And like so I'm just kind of like, so I'm like kind of like miss those times. And like even like my little dude that's 7, like there's just like some of the words that come out of his mouth and like his vocabulary. I'm like, you're so smart. Like you're gonna like you know, like I'm like, actually this is my favorite thing. Hey, Big Leo, are you a genius? Yeah. He's such a smart guy. He's just so like chill about it. I'm like, you're a genius, buddy. He's like, yeah, I know. It's just like they're so smart. So well, I guess what I'm getting at is you can learn a lot of things from your kids too. They are, you know, their brains are growing and absorbing so much information from, their surroundings and at school and stuff. And like, I don't think there's ever a time in your life where you stop learning. So I think being a dad, you need to take those moments to pause and listen to your kids more too, and kind of learn from them a bit, and just kind of all work together. So
I
other
love
than
that.
that, yeah, that's I find like yeah, just be I don't know, just pick up a dictionary, look at the word rat, and do it.
Yeah,
So
just be buddies. Just be
yeah,
buddies.
man. Yeah, man. I'm definitely buddies with my kids, but you also have to be a dad though sometimes
Yep.
too, and so. But other than that, yeah, it's really rewarding. It's like if there's like I said, going back to the new dads, I don't know if you ever feel like it's tough or anything like that. Like it's the all the rewarding moments will like pay off tenfold for those 10 seconds where it feels like rough, or like if you're like having a child's having a moment, or a temper tantrum or whatever you want to call it, and you're trying to work things through. It's just like you know try to like reflect back on when you were a kid and things like that too, and just kind of put yourself in their shoes, and just make sure that they're happy and having a good time. So
I love that. Thanks, Ben.